So I'm Atnu, and this is Rocky, and we're here to talk to you about eDiscovery in Office 365. So two of us have been working together for a while, and standing up here on the stage, bright lights, so many people, just like the presidential debates, except this is what we're going to talk to you instead of that. We're going to talk to you about how IT folks, and I'm assuming that most of you work in IT or legal IT, or have some affiliation to that, which is why you're here, how folks who work in IT or legal IT can have conversations with their legal departments about the eDiscovery tool set in Office 365, and also broaden the use of those tools to other investigation scenarios. And so we're going to show a bunch of demos. We're going to show you, deconstruct the demos, show features, talk to you about product roadmap. So I am the lead for product management for eDiscovery for Office 365. I've been in Office 365 for 5 years now, and Rocky, I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. So my name's Rocky Messing. I am a senior program manager on the Office 365 information protection team, working specifically on compliance and eDiscovery. And before we really get going and start digging in, how many people here are IT? Raise your hands. How many people here are legal? Anyone? Okay, small handful. How many people here know and understand eDiscovery? How many people here wandered into a 9 a.m. session that said reduce costs by using ... and have no idea what we're about to talk about? Okay, good. So we've got the right audience. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through a little bit about eDiscovery and how we envision eDiscovery and what we do and some of the tools that we offer to you. And you've all seen this slide probably in about 8 different sessions already. Data volumes are growing, but not only data volumes, types of data. The areas where data are coming from that you need to worry about and that you need to deal with and that you need to manage are increasing, and it becomes more and more your responsibility, the corporation's responsibility from a legal perspective to deal with these types of data on an everyday basis. So Office 365 eDiscovery is all about managing those needs, making sure that no matter what the need is, if you need to find data in your organization, if you need to locate where data is and do something with it, then we want to give you the tools to be able to actually do that. And within there, we want to give you the tools that allow you to make sure that you actually have the data, that you're controlling the data, and that you know exactly what data that is. Now, was anyone here at the session, the eDiscovery session last year? Okay, just a small handful. Well, since last year, we've come a long way. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about what we've done in the last year. But the key message here is that Office 365 eDiscovery is part of the bigger compliance picture, right? All of these different things that are listed here on the screen right now are part of our team. So our team, the eDiscovery team, is part of the larger compliance team, and we're working hand in hand with the ingestion team, with the preservation team, with the auditing team to make sure that this all works seamlessly. Because when it comes to managing that data, when it comes to being able to find that data, when it comes to an investigation, and you know that your team, the legal team, the compliance team is relying on you to be able to actually get to that data and give it to them, you need to know that it's all working hand in hand. So, with that, we are going to jump directly into a demo because, you want to see stuff. You don't want to just see screens. But I've got 3 more screens very quickly before we do the demo. And that is to introduce the players. How many people here identify with Rob? eDiscovery manager, investigator, someone who actually has to go in, do the searches, find the data. Okay? So Rob, his role is really the person who's managing that infrastructure, managing the workflow of actually identifying that data and getting that data into the hands of the people who need it. But everyone here probably has a Maria. right? An internal counsel, internal compliance officer, someone who's the one who's directing what is actually happening. They're the ones who are actually talking to the users, talking to outside users, dealing with the actual issues in the case. Now, Maria really doesn't care about technology. She wants to know that when I need something, it's there, right? She doesn't care how it actually happens. She doesn't care about the inner workings of it. But she wants to know that when she has a need, that she's able to make sure that that need is filled. And then last but not least is our friend Peter. And Peter is outside counsel, the trusted advisor, the person from the law firm who is there to give advice, not just to charge us money, but to actually provide direction, make sure that our company stays out of trouble. So those are the three players that we're gonna deal with today. Can you hit 8, if you don't mind? So let's go ahead and walk through this scenario. And the scenario is a very simple one. The scenario is Maria gets a phone call from someone inside the company saying, I feel like I'm working in a very hostile environment. There's really a lot of bad things going on over here. I don't feel comfortable with some of the things that are going on. A very vague kind of complaint. And Maria immediately calls Peter and says, Peter, we're getting this weird complaint. I don't know what to do about it. Help me, advise me. So the first thing that Peter says is make sure that all of the data from the user, Andrea, who's the one who's complaining, make sure that all of her data is preserved. Don't let it disappear. And did she mention anyone else specifically? And Maria says yes. She mentioned that there was this guy, Alex, who seems to be bothering her or something. I don't know exactly what the story is. So he says, okay, let's make sure that Alex's data also is preserved. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into the Security and Compliance Center, which hopefully you've all seen in the last couple of days or you're actually using. And the Security and Compliance Center is where all of these different tools are located. So we are going to go into the eDiscovery section, and we are going to set up a case. So this case is new mystery investigation. And right now, who should have access to this case? Well, only me, Rob, right? I'm the one who's getting this instruction from Maria. She said, I was told, preserve this data. Let's make sure that it's there. So I'm just going to go ahead, create that case, and now I'm going to go ahead and put the data on hold. And we're going to go through all of these different steps and deconstruct them, exactly what is happening on the back end and what is actually working here. So this is the hold for investigation. And what he's going to do is simply come in here and first of all put Andrea's data on hold, and then Alex's data. And then we also happen to know here that Alex is a OneDrive user, OneDrive for Business. So we're also going to make sure that Alex's OneDrive data is preserved, unless I took the wrong, sorry. Let's try that again. So Alex Darrow's data is preserved, and now I will go ahead and the question is, what am I actually preserving? So in this case, because we don't know anything beyond this vague complaint, we want to make sure that all of their data is preserved. So I'm going to leave the query blank. I'm not going to put any type of date range. I'm not going to put any words around it. I'm just going to say I want to preserve everything, and I'll go ahead and hit finish, and that'll put the hold in place. A hold is basically making sure that that data is not going to disappear even if the user goes in and deletes it. Even if they go in and hard delete it, they hit shift delete, they empty the recycling bin, that data is going to be there. So while that hold goes into place, it'll take a couple minutes to actually take effect. I'm also now going to step back. Rob says to Maria, I've done my job. I made sure that that data is preserved. What next? So Maria and Peter start having a conversation, and Peter says, you know what? I've talked to a couple of your users, and I've come up with a keyword list, which I want you to run against this data to find me documents that have to do with this actual issue. So Peter sends over to Maria this list. It's got a couple different terms in it and says, I want you to run these words. And she looks at the list and says, okay, that's a little weird, but I'm going to run them because that's what counsel said. So what we're going to do is we're going to very quickly run a search here, which we will just call search 1. And we have now a couple of options here. We can either search against all case content. What is all case content? All case content is all of the data that's been placed on hold for this case. That's what I want to search. So if you've used the eDiscovery tools in the Security and Compliance Center a couple months ago, you know that I actually had to specifically name for every time I did a search, I had to name all of the different mailboxes again and again and again. It was very repetitive. So now what we've done is you just select all case content and you're good to go. It's automatically searching those sources. If you want to, you can do custom, and you see that the sources that I already have on hold are already listed there. But if I want to, I can add additional sources here, or I can do what I'm actually going to do right now, which is I actually want to search all of Exchange for this tenant. For my organization, I want to search all of that data. So I'm going to go in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this box for Show Keyword List, which allows me to paste in all of the words. So counsel gave me a list. I don't have to actually type it out. I don't have to do ORs. I don't have to do anything else. I just paste that list in, and I go ahead and I run that search. So this is a very easy way to identify the data, to be able to find the actual data that I'm looking for. It'll actually execute that search. The search in general, from a performance standpoint, Atanu is going to go a little bit more in terms of some of the work that we've done on performance and making sure that the searches are able to run very quickly. But the biggest thing is that all of the data is indexed. So I don't have to do any additional indexing. I don't have to actually do anything else to make sure that I'm able to run the search. I am able to just go ahead and run the search as needed. So I am going to wait until that search finishes. Okay. And you can see I've got a bunch of results. So now what do I do? Well, what I can do is I can actually come into the permissions, and I can go ahead and grant Peter, as a eDiscovery manager. I can make him a manager, and I can assign him access to this case. So from a collaboration standpoint, I can now have outside counsel coming into my data InPlace where it is and letting them start to dig around in that data. And how are they going to dig around in that data? They are going to run a preview of the search results, which will actually bring up some of my results. And they will start poking through. They'll start examining that data to see, is there anything here that looks weird or looks like I need to actually deal with? Yep. And they'll go, okay, where should I go for dinner? Okay, that's a little weird. I've got also, you can see here, I've got some Twitter information. That's odd. Well, Office 365 allows you to ingest data from outside sources. So it happens to be that we have a corporate Twitter account that it looks like Alex was using to send some odd messages here sometimes. Yeah, I think that there's actually something here that's really not right. So Peter, having looked at that data, goes ahead and says to Maria, you've got a problem. I want you to go ahead and start doing something else with this data. We need to take a deeper look at it. We're going to have to actually start moving forward. And with that, I am going to pause, and we will continue with this scenario in a minute or two. And let's jump to five. Yep. Atanu.
So let's talk about what you just saw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the demo for you and explain the different pieces so you can understand what's going on behind the scenes. So the first thing I want to call out is that traditionally when we've talked about this in the past, we've talked about this in a litigation context. But what we wanted to show was that the tools can actually be used in a variety of different scenarios. So when you move your data into Office 365, we're like the custodians of your data, but it's still your data. So it's like a bank. You go, you store your assets with the bank, your money, whatever, but you still own that stuff. And so we're taking the same approach in Office 365. So we want to give you the tools that help you retain the control and the visibility of your data. And that means that you'll be able to search through it, you'll be able to act upon it, you'll be able to apply policy to it. And so that means if your legal teams need to find something because they got sued, they'll be able to do that. If your security teams need to search for and purge phishing emails, they'll be able to do that. If you have investigators who are looking for trying to respond to regulatory requests or do internal investigations, they'll be able to do that. If your CEO needs to go to Congress and if he needs to know whether he needs to plead the fifth, he'll be able to do that as well. And the advantage is that we provide all those tools for investigators within Office 365. You don't need to use anything special. You don't need to copy all of the data into some other tool. And so what we're going to show later in the session is we're going to actually show Microsoft as a use case, and we're going to talk about how some of the different investigator teams in Microsoft use these tools. But I just wanted to call out that those scenarios cover legal compliance, employment law, things like that. And when you look at what those investigators are doing, they're basically it all revolves around the concept of a case. So there's a single case management system with the people assigned to that case. Typically, those are either investigators or in Microsoft, there's usually an attorney who's assigned to a case and he's overseeing the case, and sometimes it's outside counsel. And so these different people are basically collaborating among themselves. And so what we did for the case is we let you add different roles. Some of these people may be within your organization, some of these people may be outside. So for example, the outside counsel. And so we have a security model that allows that. So you can delegate access to external folks. And then you don't even need to assign licenses to them because they're not going to be using your system to send emails. And then you can assign role-based access. You can use security filters. So you might say, this legal counsel, he's only focused on this department, and so he can only access email mailboxes for that department. So all of that's baked in the security model. And then within a case, you can do subject, query-based holds. You can search, you can investigate, you can export stuff. So fundamentally, we're doubling down on the concept of a case in Office 365, and over time, that will keep evolving. And what we want to also make sure is that the tools are powerful enough for a specialist. So a guy who likes to craft his own custom queries, but also easy enough to use for a generalist who's doing this for the first time, because we do see a lot of first-time eDiscovery buyers come to Office 365. Now, while we're trying to provide all these powerful tools for investigators, we're also trying to do something else that's really important, which is we want to be able to make it possible for end users to keep using their own productivity tools without being hampered by investigation. So they should be able to edit stuff, they should be able to delete stuff, they should be able to migrate stuff, copy stuff, all of that stuff, but in a way that we're not compromising things like hold or the investigations. Now, there's a really important reason for that. One is, as Microsoft, we're kind of committed to end user productivity, so that's kind of our secret sauce. But the second thing is, if you look at some of the investigations, in the litigation scenarios, the custodians are notified at the beginning, and they get an email. They say, hey, this is the case. This is what we want you to do. But for some of the other investigations, for example, the legal compliance, or if there's a suspicion of pilfering or things like that, some of those investigations, the subjects, and they're not custodians, and they're subjects or the witnesses, they don't even get notified until the end of the case. And so the investigation is going on, but we don't want them to know. And so that's why it's important for us that the tools keep working the way they do. And so what we do for that is we have this notion of preservation in place. And this is an important concept to wrap your heads around, because a lot of customers have in the past been using approaches like journaling for this. And so what we have is a different way, or it's more of a cloud-friendly way, where we actually hold the content in place, and it doesn't get changed when users change them. I'm going to show you two slides right after this to show how that works, so that you'll understand it better. But I just want to call out that the result of that is that it reduces your risk, because you're not duplicating all of your content from Office 365 into a separate system, which might even be outside of your firewall. And so you have fewer people looking at your sensitive information. You also get higher fidelity because we can grab all the headers. We'll have things like drafts, stuff that isn't typically captured by journaling. And also, we have non-email related content like Office documents in SharePoint, OneDrive, all of that stuff. And we have a fairly rich set of tools around that. So without any further ado, let's talk about how that works. So I'm giving the first example of Exchange. And this shows you how the mail folders are organized in the mailbox. How many folks here are familiar with the recoverable items folder? OK, so I see maybe 50-50. So I'll give you a brief summary. But if you think of the mail subtrees within a mailbox, there's the IPM subtree, which is the user's own personal information. And then there's the non-IPM subtree, which is all the system-generated stuff. And the recoverable items folder is in the non-IPM subtree. It's something you cannot see from Outlook. So if you go to Outlook, you'll see the top set of folders. And then what happens is that if a message gets delivered to a user's inbox, he can obviously delete it, and then it goes to his deleted items folder. And then if he soft deletes it out of that, then what happens is that it goes to the deletions folder inside the recoverable items folder. And at that point, he can't see it in the UI anymore because that folder is not visible. However, he can still undelete it. There's a button in Outlook that lets you recover stuff out of that folder. And that's the deletions folder. So it's a separate folder. It exists. The user has a button to recover stuff out of it, but he can't actually access the folder itself. And then from there, if enough time elapses, then the mails will actually move to the purges folder or to the discovery hold folder. It depends on whether the entire mailbox is put on hold, and we call that a litigation hold, or if you're using an InPlace hold where you're saying, I don't want to hold the whole mailbox, but I want to just specify some kind of keyword-based query and just preserve part of that content. So the advantage of that is that as mails are coming in and the user is editing or deleting or doing whatever he wants, we're actually hanging on to all of those messages. And we're also hanging on to versions of those messages in case he changes the metadata. So that's how we can enable this kind of magic of InPlace, where users' productivity is not hampered. They're doing everything that they would do normally, but we're also being able to enable the investigation workflows. So in the litigation case, where the user knows, or in all the other kinds of investigation cases, the legal compliance, or the HR cases where the user doesn't know, in all cases, both the investigators and the users are being able to do what they need. And SharePoint has a very similar story. When you create a site, if the site gets placed on hold, what happens behind the scenes is that a preservation hold library gets created for you, and then any documents that get deleted are actually preserved there if the site is on hold. And if you have versioning turned on, then every single version is also preserved. If you haven't enabled versioning, we'll just hang on to the version of the document as it existed at the time of the hold and whatever the current state of the document is. So that gives you kind of a quick tour of how the InPlace hold actually works. And what that means is that we can both enable the investigation flows as well as the end user productivity. Now, once you have that stuff on hold, you want to search through it. And what we want to do is introduce two concepts here. One is the search, and one is the analysis of the data. So my wife, we have a fairly large garage, and my wife often asks me to find stuff in the garage. And the way that we have it organized is we have a bunch of boxes. We just pick them up from Walmart. And we put all this stuff in the boxes. And what we did is we put a label on each of the boxes that says roughly what's inside it, like household items, bed sheets, stuff like that. So whenever we want to find stuff, we just look for the right set of boxes that it might be in. And if we have actually about 150 boxes in our garage, we just find the 5 or 10 boxes that we think it's in, and then we look through that. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is that the InPlace search is very similar to that. If you have 50, 100, 100,000 employees in your organization, and you want to search for something, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So it's very hard to actually look through content for that many people. And so what we want you to do is we want you to use the InPlace search tools to find the few custodians that are likely to have bearing on the case. And some of that's very dynamic. Some of the investigations are dynamic. So there's some, you look for stuff, you find something, then you find related content, and you keep looking for people. But that first set of search scenarios where you're trying to identify custodians, that's really great using InPlace Search. And so we've also added a few new features like the query statistics and the location statistics, so that if you use keywords and you say, where did I get the hits, we'll show you which users generated the hits. We'll show you which keywords and the distribution of the hits among the keywords. And you can use that to identify the custodians. And then what you can do then is you can minimize the amount of stuff that you need to export into a processing tool or export out of Office 365. And that's important to us because we don't want to treat Office 365 as a pipeline where you guys are archiving stuff and exporting out all of that stuff, because that's not scalable. So we want you to do as much data minimization as possible within Office 365. And we believe that we have the right search tools to make that possible. The other thing that Rocky showed in the demo was he showed data from outside Office 365. So how is that happening? So there's two sets of data that you can pull in. So one is your on-premises data, or file shares. And I'm going to actually walk you through the Microsoft case a little further down, and we're going to show how this is done. But you have two different ways you can achieve this. You can use some of our network APIs, or you can use drive shipping if you have a lot of data. And then once you get an Office 365, you can archive it, and all of our eDiscovery tools just work on that data from on-prem. But you also have the ability to ingest third-party data. So these could be social feeds, as Rocky mentioned. These could be a company's Twitter account, things like that. It could be vertical feeds like Bloomberg, SMS, text messaging, a whole variety of stuff. Now, the way that you import that kind of information is through partners. And so we have a set of partners who do that for us. And then they're listed on our website. So you can reach out to one of them, and they'll help you get that information in Office 365. And once that happens, then all of the eDiscovery tools just work on that content, just like it does for native content in Office 365. So I'm going to hand back to Rocky to do the second demo.
Thank you. OK, so we are now at the stage where we know that something's wrong. We know that something's not quite right. And Maria goes to Rob and says, I want you to prep this data, start getting it ready for me to be able to look at, start getting it ready for me to work together with Peter to actually do something about the data. So this organization has advanced eDiscovery available to them. So what they are going to do is they are going to come into here, into Advanced eDiscovery, and they are going to use our Express Analysis tool, which basically says, I'm going to take that search that I did in the main eDiscovery search, and I'm going to go ahead, and with one click, I can click on the Express Analysis button, and it will submit all of those documents for near dupe, email threading, themes analysis, and export the data out so that now I've got that data on my system to look at. So we did a little search. We got some sample data. We run it through all of the analytics tools. And the analytics tools in general will take a little bit of time to run. But it's a one-click button, go through, and get all of my results out. So the question is, what are these results? What am I actually looking at? What am I dealing with here? So I'm going to show you a quick example of something that you can look at that helps the attorneys to actually analyze this data. With the export, which will have all of the data broken out, it'll have all the text of the documents, it'll have all of the native formats of the documents, it has all the metadata about the documents, you get an Excel that allows you to very quickly run through, and Excel is a tool that all attorneys know how to use. For a small investigation, it works perfectly, to be able to very quickly start to look at this data and start to understand what's in the data. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually look at it and say, I've got this themes list, which, let's try that. Make it a little. Hopefully that's a little easier to see. But I've got a themes list which automatically, without having to do anything to the data, it uses machine learning to actually identify thematic elements within the documents. So I can use it to right away start to analyze and start to see within these documents that hit these keywords that my attorney said that I should run, the attorney can right away go in and start to understand what are the different topics, what are the themes that these users are talking about. in their emails, in their conversations, in their IMs, in their Word documents, whatever it might be. So they can go in and maybe they'll find a topic that's interesting. But more importantly is we said that we ran all of these analytics. Well, two of the sets of analytics is something called near dupe and email threading. Near dupe basically allows me to identify similar documents. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and identify documents that are textually duplicates. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we deconstruct. Email threading helps me to identify unique content within the documents, within the emails. So two people are going back and forth in an email conversation. We'll identify which ones contain all of the other emails in that conversation and which ones have to actually be looked at. So we have here this field called for review, which is a simple binary field. And what we'll do is we'll only look at the documents that the system has identified the user actually has to review. And by looking at only those documents, they're going to look at only the ones that contain unique information. So even though I had like 7,500 documents in this export of this quick search that I ran for the attorney to look at, if I actually only look at the unique content, it knocks it down to 4,300 documents. So right away, without any other effort but that one click of clicking that Express Analysis button, I am able to save my attorney 42% of their review time. I am able to reduce the costs of the time and effort that the attorneys need to look at the documents by knocking out 42% of the documents that they have to look at. And if we just do some quick math around that reduction of 42%, in this small little case where it's only 7,500 documents, and I'm going to say that, let's say Peter is a relatively reasonable outside counsel attorney, we're only paying him $250 an hour, right? That's pretty low, actually, for a lot of outside counsel. Well, this quick little button, this Express Analysis that I did, is going to save our company $16,000, just like that, by eliminating documents that otherwise we would have given them that they have to look at, and they no longer have to look at because we've identified not that they're exact duplicates, but that they are either email threads that have unique content or they're near duplicates that have unique content. So the attorney can go in here and they can start to look around, and they might come in here and they might say, okay, I want to specifically look at Andrea and Alex, and I am going to very quickly start to narrow this data set down. I can start to actually look through these documents to start to see what is actually in them. And I've got links here to the actual documents, so if I click on any given document, then I can actually pull up the document and look at it. And I can just make a quick notation after looking at it that, yeah, this is something that's relevant to my investigation. So I can very quickly analyze these documents, use the themes to understand what's in them, look at only the unique content, and then go ahead and actually start moving through. But the other thing is, let's say Peter starts looking at these documents and realizes we've got a bigger issue here, right? I think we need to actually do a much broader search. We need to start collecting data from 10, 15, 20 different users within the organization, and we're going to have to look at that data. Now, with the amount of data that most users have, if I'm collecting from 20 users, that may very well be 1 million, 2 million, 5 million documents just by collecting 20 users' data if I'm not putting any kind of date restrictions or anything else on that. A lot of data, it's going to end up costing me a lot of money. So what we do is we enable the machine learning of predictive coding. And we gave Peter a login into our system. And when Peter logs in, if you remember, oops, I went to the wrong one. Sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, when Rob went into the system, he had a whole bunch of buttons on the top, including that Express Analysis, because he's an admin, he's dealing with the data. Peter's an attorney. He doesn't want to actually deal with the data. He doesn't care about what happens on the processing. All that he cares about is he wants to go in and actually, sorry, I went into the wrong one. He wants to go in here into this new investigation and look at the data that he has to actually look at. So this is where machine learning is going to come into play. We are going to pick specific documents that we want Peter to look at, and Peter simply comes in here, reads the document, and simply has to say, is this document relevant or not to the case that I'm actually dealing with? Okay? When he goes ahead and he does that, we are able to learn from the data what is relevant and what is not. So he's doing training. He's sampling the data based on our active learning algorithm to actually teach the system what is relevant and what is not. And by doing so, it is going to score all of the documents in this collection, the 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, whatever it is, and it's going to be able to say, if I want to go ahead and look at only the data that is most likely to be relevant, what percentage of that data do I need to look at? And every single document is going to get a score that when I exported that data out, I can go in here and I can see, sorry, got to actually find the field. I can see what is the score that this document has. If I can, there we go. I can see what is the scores that these documents have, and I can actually start by all of these 1.0 documents. They are really, really likely to be relevant. But if I go ahead and I start looking at other documents that have lower scores, then I'll see that a lot of my documents, what's it? Huh? Ah. Oh, because I'm looking at the wrong field. Sorry. All of these documents have various different scores from 0 to 100. And if I sort these documents, the higher the score, the more likely a document is to be relevant. I'm going to look at the documents that are more likely to be relevant. So I might take my 1 million, 2 million, 5 million documents, reduce that down to only look at 20% of the documents that scored high, that are really, really likely to be relevant. And that way, I'm able to very quickly reduce the overall volume, utilize the machine learning to get to that relevant document as quickly as possible. So let's say I go ahead and I do that, and now I realize that, you know what? I actually do have to look at 1 million documents, because I started with 5 million documents, and I'm now down to 1 million documents. I'm only going to look at 20%, but do I really want to use Excel to look at 20 million documents? I mean, sorry, to look at 1 million documents, to look at 20%? Absolutely not. So this is where we enable our integration technology partners in the eDiscovery review space to actually get into this data and load the data into some of the standard eDiscovery review tools that probably most of you are familiar with, that you are sending the data out to providers to have them load it into these various different tools to be able to use. So once I've determined that this is actually a bigger case, and this is bigger than I can handle in-house, I am able to then utilize these top-notch review tools to be able to actually slice and dice and apply, give 30 attorneys access to this and let them all go into the data at once and actually review it. So let's take a look at what we've actually seen here. If we can. Okay, so this step, this second part of this demo was all about how do we minimize the actual data that is coming out of the system in order to make sure that we're only reviewing the documents that actually have to be reviewed, and how do we understand what it is that we're actually reviewing. So the first thing that we did was we ran the Advanced eDiscovery Analytics. And the Advanced eDiscovery Analytics start off with all of the data that we have in the population. And it's unstructured data in that, yes, it's email, it's Word documents, it's things that are in folders, et cetera, but we don't understand what the content is there. You've just got a lot of content that's broadly built out. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run a search to go from the entire corpus of the corporation to get down to the specific custodians, the specific users. Maybe we'll use keywords. We're going to get down to the actual data that we want to look at. So that's the first step. But then we want to understand what is that data. So at that point, we're going to use themes to actually automatically pull out the topics, the themes, the thematic elements that these documents are talking about to give us an understanding of the data. right? Let us first start in this investigation to see what are the topics, do we have something that we're worried about, are there things that I want the attorney to right away narrow in on, and start looking at those documents. The next step was that we used relevance, which is the predictive coding, which will, with the training, determine what is likely to be relevant and what is likely not to be relevant, and out of that entire set of 5 million documents that we might have been dealing with, we get it down to 1 million documents that actually have to be reviewed. And then lastly, we're able to use the email threading and the near dupes. The email threading to identify unique content, to be able to actually see which documents, once I've got it down to that million, or in that small first step of the investigation, I had 7,500. Let me reduce that down to just over 4,000. Let me see which documents have to be reviewed because they have unique content. And on the near dupe side, let me identify when documents are textually similar. So if I'm looking at 2 different documents, I've got 2 contracts, I'm able to, instead of looking at the first contract in the morning, right after I've had my coffee, I'm ready to go, I look at it, I examine it, I know that it's relevant, and then 7 hours later, it's the end of the day, and the second contract pops up. I don't remember what I did that morning. I don't remember what I did an hour ago. I want to be able to look at both of those contracts at the same time. So near dupe will bring those documents together to allow the attorney to look at them at the same time, to tell the attorney these 2 contracts are 96% similar. Don't waste your time reading the 15-page contract twice. Just read the first one, and then look at the differences. Look at where those 2 documents differ, that 4% difference. You'll reduce the amount of time that it takes the attorney to review, and you'll end up saving a lot of money because the less time that the attorneys are looking at documents, the more money that the corporation is saving. So that's the advanced eDiscovery analytics. The next piece is the export. So we know, if anyone's used any of the eDiscovery tools in Microsoft Office 365 before, you know that you can export this data using the standard export tools to get the data out into its native format. So you'll get a PST file, you'll get SharePoint data or OneDrive data will come in a structure of the file system. That, absolutely, you can still do that today. It's a great solution, especially when I have to move some large amounts of data over to a vendor or to give the attorney, for some reason, they want to look at it in Outlook, something like that. Option number 2 is if I want to actually browse it a little bit easier and have the ability to use all of the analytics information, to be able to see the themes, to be able to identify just which documents need to be reviewed by using that for review field, I can browse the Excel file. It has the links to actually see the native documents, to actually see the documents in context. It's a great tool for small investigations. Even if I'm a large corporation, I've got an eDiscovery partner who I outsource my processing to outsource my hosting and review. It's fine. If I've got that small, tiny investigation, I just want someone to quickly look at that data, I can use that. But in the larger cases, where I know that I'm going to need to have a team of attorneys actually looking at this data and really digging in and doing things like redactions and doing things like applying Bates numbers to the documents. It's things that we get asked about all the time. We have our partners who we are able to, again, do the analysis in Office 365, but the partners come in through their integrations to automatically read that data and allow you to do all those other steps within their various different tools. So I've got a lot of different options in order to be able to actually get to that data at the end of the day. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Atanu to walk us through a case study.
So the case study I want to talk about is Microsoft internally, and what I wanted to do is talk about 2 things. One is the set of use cases, the set of scenarios that we have within Microsoft, and then just talk about the evolution of how Microsoft has evolved and along. So this is our own litigation group and this investigation group, how they've evolved their use cases and their processes and the implementation in lockstep with us as we've kind of evolved the technology. So Within Microsoft, we have these different groups of that do investigations. Some of them roll up to finance, some of them roll up into our legal departments, but they're essentially looking for a variety of different things. So some folks are responding to lawsuits, some folks are looking into criminal behavior, pilfering, allegations like that. Some folks are looking into employment law. For example, if there's an audit by the Department of Labor, some folks are looking at HR issues, like if an employee is complaining about not being treated fairly, their investigations around financial impropriety, things like that. And so for all of these groups, we treat them like customer zero. And so what that means is that they use the earliest versions of our tech. They don't use any other, they don't have any secret sauce. They don't have any special access to stuff that we do that you guys don't have access. So they use the same set of tools that we're offering everybody. And what we've done is we've worked with them to also identify some of the trends that they've been seeing. And so one of the interesting things that happened was that back in 2008, when the economy went into a tailspin, so this group was asked to save a lot of money. So at that time, they had a process where they would send paralegals out in response to any lawsuit, and those guys would basically just image hard drives and collect stuff, and then copy all of that information into these large file shares that we call the litigation repository. And we would hand all of that content over to a litigation support vendor who would process it for us and then handle the review. And when this back in 2008, when this group was asked to kind of save a lot of money from that rather expensive process, what they did was they made an effort to insource as much of that as they could. And so where they ended up with was now we do a lot of the processing and the analysis in-house, and then we try to cull that in-house, and we hand over just the culled data to our litigation support vendor. And what we found is that, so I don't know if you guys have seen this statistic, but for companies in the US that have over $1 billion in revenue, on an average, there are about 147 active lawsuits at any given time. So Microsoft is a lot higher than that. We're maybe about 3 times that volume. But what we did was we just looked at a subset of those cases that came to the litigation group, where they actually went and didn't just put content on hold, but they also searched and analyzed it, and then there was processing for that. And what they found was on an average, there were a certain number of cases, and for each of those cases, on an average, 45 people were put on hold. And then they worked with our attorneys and outside counsel to come up with the right queries. They identified the custodians, and only 13 people on an average were actually, their data was searched. Now, this is an average number. Some of the individual cases were much higher. There was a case with 180 people whose data was being looked through. But what they found was that when they did the study over a 3-year period between 2011 and 2013, on average, about so each Microsoft had about 30 plus gigabytes of stuff, and this excluded things like executables, NIST files, system files, stuff like that. It also excluded things like employees' media, like pictures of the family, and so. But if you just look at the raw volume of data, they found that on an average they could get a 95% cull rate just using the tools within Office 365 to search and minimize that data. And so if you look at how much it would cost to have a lit support vendor handle the entire unculled data versus how much it was to handle just the 5% that made it through this data minimization step, it's a savings of about $3.7 million a year. And so that's a significant amount of money. And it doesn't count any other efficiencies that they could make elsewhere in the process. So this is something that worked really well for them. And they recently did another study, and so this is this current fiscal year. And what they found was that the number of people whose content is on hold has gone up. The amount of content that's on hold for these people has gone up. So you can see that 1.3 terabytes is now increased to 2.5 terabytes. And this goes back to Raki's point at the beginning of the session, where he talked about the increase in data volumes and the complexities of different types of data. And so this shows how this is playing out in Microsoft as well. So what does that mean from an implementation, deployment, tools use perspective? So this shows what the eDiscovery process looked like from Microsoft before they moved to the cloud. So this is, we're using Exchange in SharePoint 2013. If you look at the gray box at the bottom, this is represents the lit support vendor. They use a linear review tool. They have a set of contract attorneys looking through that stuff. And so that process has remained fairly static and constant and unchanged over the last 10, 15 years. But on the top box, we were using SharePoint eDiscovery Center to search through content that was sitting in our Exchange servers on premises. We also had a bunch of file shares, as I said, the litigation repository. And so for any local data that was sitting on people's machines, laptops, the PST content was being ingested into Exchange, and the non-PST content was being copied over in the file shares, which was then being crawled and indexed and searched through using the SharePoint on-premises eDiscovery. So because this was the base before the cloud migration, moving to the cloud was actually relatively simple. So you can see that SharePoint on-premises became SharePoint Online, Exchange on-premises became Exchange Online. We added OneDrive for Business into the mix. The advanced eDiscovery tools are now being added in as well. So what that means is that the Microsoft legal folks, the litigation team, can handle the majority of their eDiscovery needs right there in the cloud. And the majority of our content is actually in the cloud now because we've done most of that migration. But we are still hybrid. And even though the majority of our processing is happening in the cloud, there is still a small set of information that's still sitting on premises. And we often get customers who ask why that's the case, and the easiest answer is we also have to ship the on-premises bits. And so we have this culture of dog fooding within Microsoft, and so we've reserved a small number of people whose mailboxes are sitting on these dog food, on-premises server bits. And so because of that, we have the following setups. We have this hybrid configuration where not only do we have these servers in the cloud where most of the eDiscovery is happening, we also have the on-premises Exchange servers, the on-premises SharePoint sites, and then some file shares. And so the way that we're looking to do this eDiscovery for that is that the content from the file shares, just as in the pre-cloud days, we're going to host it in file shares, except now these have moved into Azure. So these are the litigation repository is now going to be sitting in Azure, and that content is being indexed by SharePoint Online. And then the SharePoint content is also going to go through SharePoint Online. And finally, the Exchange content is going through Exchange Online. So what that means is, let's take the case of Steve Ballmer. So when he was an active participant in some of these, he's a custodian in a bunch of these cases before. And so if he had on-premises PST, either a PST that was secured from his mailbox, or if his account was on premises, then what the litigation team would do is they would create a copy of, or they would create a mailbox, a separate mailbox for him in Exchange Online, and that mailbox would be something like Steve Ballmer's mailbox. It's not the mailbox that he uses. His actual email is going through his own company mailbox. This is a separate mailbox that's managed by the litigation team. And so that way, any stuff that's been taken out of his mailbox, he doesn't have to deal with it. There's a reason it came out of his mailbox, but it's still available for eDiscovery and for search. And so using this hybrid configuration, we can still do all of the searches through the Security and Compliance Center. We can still use advanced eDiscovery in the cloud to process that and minimize that. And then when that processing is done, then we export that out to Azure. And that data, once it's exported into Azure, can either be picked up by one of our technology partners. We have 11 different review tools that Rocky showed the list of, which natively import or ingest our exported content, or could be downloaded to the local machine of an investigator for whatever need they have. So that's the story of how Microsoft uses these tools. And this is what we expect the end state to be. So for a customer who's in a hybrid state, there's a lot of, in many cases, the reason that you're in a hybrid state is because you're in migration. So you started from an on-premises system, you're moving to the cloud, but that doesn't happen overnight. So you have this state where you're in transition. And so once you finish the migration, so once you're fully in the cloud, then you can deprecate both the on-premises system, the file shares, and basically everything that we talked about just now. And then it revolves back down to what we said earlier, which is the cloud-native version of eDiscovery. So that was a very quick overview of Microsoft's own experiences using the eDiscovery tools. And so we're going to talk about two things next. One is what's the set of progress that we've made, and then what is our roadmap for the future. So as Rocky asked you guys at the beginning, how many of you were here at last Ignite, and not a lot of you were, but we're kind of happy with the progress that we've made over the last year or so. So now eDiscovery in Office 365 is faster, it covers more scenarios, it's smarter. We've added predictive analytics in advanced eDiscovery. We've shipped advanced eDiscovery, that wasn't there before. We've added data manipulation tools. It's more insightful. You get query statistics, location statistics, things that, statistical information that you didn't have before. Rocky demonstrated thematic analysis, the relevance scoring, things like that. So that's at a very high level. So let's look into that a little deeper now. So this kind of breaks down some of the progress in these 4 areas. So the first thing is we've shipped the Security and Compliance Center. I don't know how many of you have been in other sessions where we've shown this, but we think of the Security and Compliance Center as a one-stop shop for everything related to security and compliance for Office 365. So those are like two sides of the same coin. We have security-related information, we have compliance, and that way you get a standard set of experiences across all the content in Office 365. So before, we used to have an eDiscovery Center in SharePoint, we used to have an eDiscovery Center in Exchange. Now you do it from a single place. You can apply the same queries from a single place. The query languages are now consistent. We use KQL in both places. And so there's a lot of benefits to just using that consistent experience. And so what we've seen is that over the last 6-8 months since we started shipping this stuff, the usage of search and export within the Security and Compliance Center has been growing pretty rapidly. And the usage inside some of the legacy eDiscovery centers in SharePoint and Exchange, that has been reducing. And so we're kind of happy with that progress. Now, the reason that that's happened is because of the following slide. We've been very aggressive about looking at, about making investments to ensure parity of the Security and Compliance Center relative to the eDiscovery's experiences in the legacy SharePoint and Exchange. And so we have a long list of features that we've added in. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but just picking one. Say export reports. That's something we now add. So when you do an export, you get a set of CSV files which give you a summary of the exports, and there's also one that basically breaks it down for you and shows the results of each individual item that is exported. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. For folks who've been working with us, you'll probably recognize some of these. And so as we've been making progress over the last few months, we feel a lot more confident about saying that the Security and Compliance Center is good enough for most customers, and they should not be using the legacy environments anymore. The other thing that we did was we shipped advanced eDiscovery. So at last Ignite, we talked to you. So Quentin was talking about the eDiscovery tools in Office 365. Rocky was talking about the Equivio Zoom product. We just announced the acquisition of Zoom. But now what we've done is we've shipped Zoom as its own extension to Office 365. It offers a fairly rich set of capabilities. We've added more partners. We now have 11 review partners. There's a bunch of momentum in that area. The other thing that we've done is we've made a bunch of improvements to reliability and to scalability. So for example, before, when we shipped advanced eDiscovery, you could only have 3 cases a tenant. That limitation is gone. We've done a bunch of work in this so that searches can be broader. I don't know if you guys have used the old Exchange eDiscovery Center, but at that point, we had a limitation of 10,000 mailboxes. In the new Security Compliance Center, we do no longer have that. We have customers who routinely do searches across hundreds of thousands of mailboxes. And so we're really proud about the work that's happened in that scalability area. But there's still work that we need to do. So we got some feedback from customers that some of the error handling is confusing. Sometimes it's hard to understand some of the results that we show. And so we're working hard in this area. So we're improving the error reporting. We're adding more analytics to search and export. We're adding auditing. So for folks who are looking for it, we announced the eDiscovery auditing about a month ago. So that's all work that we're working, the stuff that's in progress and in flight. The other area I want to talk about is performance. So Rocky alluded to this earlier, but we get a lot of customer questions about, what SLA are we promising for export, and how much and how fast can they export stuff out of the system. So the SLA that we have is 10 gigabytes an hour for 95% of the export cases that have 10 custodians or more. Now, you might ask, why is that not a simple number? Hey, why didn't you just give me one big number and holding us to that? But the reason is that the way that our export works is it becomes more efficient as you export more mailboxes, because we run those in parallel. So if we get a customer who's trying to export data from or search through and export from a lot of different mailboxes, since we're kicking that off in parallel, the overall export speed is a lot higher. And so if you look at the chart, you can see that as the number of mailboxes exported increases, the export speeds go up. And so I wanted to call out a couple of things. One is that the export performance is well above our SLA right now. That shows the target. We're consistently beating it if you have multiple mailboxes. And the other thing is that this is an area where we continue to invest in. And so you can see that I've shown the numbers for July and for August, and just the August numbers are a lot higher than July because we continue to optimize this and continue to make this more efficient. The reason that we're showing you this is that we've got questions from a number of customers recently where they're trying to automate some of their workflows, and they're trying to actually script this where they're trying to export out a single mailbox at a time. And we had a customer who tried to do this for 1,000 mailboxes, and they're saying it's slow. And the reason that it's slow is because you're not giving us the chance to kind of optimize on our side. And we want, think of it like a database. You give us a query, we'll optimize the query, and we know how to fan it out. That's the same situation here. And the other thing I wanted to call out was that the more you use the data minimization tools in Office 365, you shouldn't need to do these large exports, because you can reduce the number of custodians that you need to export for. And that was one of the reasons we showed you the Microsoft example, because as I said, the Microsoft litigation teams with a 3 times higher than average caseload is being able to do this without having a problem. So there is a call to action. The call to action is that we are strongly encouraging all customers to start using the Security and Compliance Center for eDiscovery and to move off the legacy SharePoint Online and Exchange Online eDiscovery centers. If you feel that there's a feature that's missing that you need and that's blocking your migration, we do encourage you to reach out. We are working with kind of customers on a case-by-case basis, but we believe that for most customers, we have achieved parity, and that you should be able to use the Security and Compliance Center for your eDiscovery needs. Next, I'm going to talk about more futuristic stuff. So this is roadmap, and this shows you an overview of where we're investing going forward. So the first thing I'm going to call out is unified case management. So we have 2 different tools right now. We have eDiscovery and Security Compliance Center for folks who have licenses up to E3 or E4. And if you have an E5 license, or if you have the standalone license, then you get the advanced eDiscovery feature set. And right now, these are 2 different consoles that look fairly consistent, but what we're doing is we're combining them into a single console that's consistent with the rest of the Security and Compliance Center. So that's a huge area of investment for us. If you have any questions around that area, feel free to reach out to me. And for the next set of investments, I'm going to hand it back over to Rocky, and he's going to walk you through them.
Thanks. So the next piece is, I showed you a couple things that you can do in terms of running some basic keyword searches, proximity searches. We're looking to enhance the overall capabilities in the searching that we enable for users to do. And some of the examples of the things that we're beginning to work on that we're looking at adding in are some of the things listed here. A lot more visualization, a lot more of the ability to actually look at your data and understand the data in a much clearer way, to be able to visually filter that data, as well as additional investigation tools to enable you to use the analytics to be able, within Office 365, without doing the exports, to really be able to understand that data and to give you a much simpler, cleaner search experience. So I wanted to show, these are mock-ups of some of the things that we're already working on, that we're beginning to work on from a design perspective, of some examples of what we're thinking about. And what you can see here is this is a search results page after I've gone ahead and done that search. And if you saw before, I did a quick preview of some of the results. The preview that I showed has a maximum of 1,000 items. And what this allows me to do is you can see on the bottom, this is 34 pages of results. It's 18,000, almost 19,000 results here. It's a much cleaner, optimized type of experience that you can grant access to the attorneys to actually go in and view the data and make their way through my search results. In addition to that, giving them, once they've got some initial search results, without having to go in and do additional keyword searches, they can come in and they can start to do some much more advanced filtering. So this is a drag and drop type of interface that allows me to build out either simple or really complex searches. It allows me to switch between ands and ors to build out. I can combine dates, I can combine metadata, I can look at domains, I can do all kinds of things to build out these really, really complex search scenarios if I need it, or to use a simple kind of builder to be able to just very quickly get to that data that I want to see. The next thing is I showed you during the demo in Excel the ability to use filters to basically drop down and see what the different themes that were going on within the data set is. But here, what you can see is this is a visualization of those themes that not only shows me what are the different themes that are going on within a specific data set, but it also shows me an overlay of my relevance, of my predictive coding information that shows me for each theme that a document is talking about, what percentage of the documents within that theme are relevant versus not relevant, based on the machine learning that was done and the training that was done to understand that data set. Another example that I wanted to show is this one, which is really geared towards investigators. This is a view that an investigator is able to use to start to see a from-to analysis based off of various different conversations that, in this case, in the Enron data set, that Ken Lay and Robert had, and who the other participants were, what are the different themes that are going on within those conversations, and a timeline view that makes it very easy to start to filter and understand the patterns of communications within this data set. And the conceptual idea behind this is that based on my scenario, based on what I'm trying to find, I've got different widgets that I can basically place in here that if I want to understand a different set of information about this data, I can change my view to now see a different way of looking and analyzing that data. Here I can see the participants of the custodians who are involved and the percentage of relevant data that each of those custodians have, as well as a breakdown of how much unique information does each custodian have. And if I were to click on any of these different rows within the table above, the bottom parts will automatically update to show me what the different analysis of that custodian or of the theme or the combination of those would be. So we are absolutely dedicated to making sure that you have the tools to give to the investigators, to the attorneys, to the compliance officers, to make sure that they are able to understand what is in that data set in place, in Office 365, as the data resides. So some additional feedback that we've gotten from clients moving through the roadmap was that eDiscovery and RMS don't play well together. We've heard this over and I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads here. So some of the things that we're working on currently is automatic RMS decryption, so that when I do an eDiscovery search and then I get my results, I am able to automatically decrypt those results so I don't have to worry about getting RMS encrypted files when the exports are done. Obviously, all audited and able to track, so that way you can't just have people randomly sending out, doing exports to get around RMS encryption. Another big ask has been OCR. So we know that not all data has text or has text that's searchable within it. The ability to actually OCR the data in place within Office 365, and to be able to then do additional searching and analytics against that data once I have the text available to me, to be able to actually deal with that text afterwards. And lastly is enhancing the overall support for different file types and metadata. We already support a ton of different file types, and in our exports we include a lot of different metadata types. We actually did a release on Monday that increased the number of metadata types that come out of advanced eDiscovery, but we are dedicated to making sure that those pieces are complete, that you have absolutely all of the information that you need in order to make sure that the attorneys are comfortable with the work product that is coming out. On the defensibility side, we've heard some feedback specifically around the differences between estimates and search results, and we wanted to ensure you that we are absolutely working on these to make sure that you have that confidence that the defensibility that is required from the data and from using the Office 365 exports and searching tools is there, making sure that you have more transparency into those results to understand when there are differences, why are those differences there, what the difference is from a live system, because again, the indexes are live, so as data's flowing through, I might run a search, I run an export even 10 minutes later, and I'll get some different results at times. We want to make sure that you understand why those differences exist and are able to very easily reconcile those differences. And then last but not least is we've heard that you want to make sure that you are able to deal with different geographies, deal with government clients, want to be able to do advanced eDiscovery in the government community cloud. And we are working right now on making sure that the availability of advanced eDiscovery is globally available, as well as specific localization for different geographies. So one of the big ones is in Japanese. Because of the way that the language is handled in different ways in the character sets, when we're doing the analytics, they want to know that we're handling those things correctly and that the GUI, the UI, is in their own language. So we are currently working on the localization of these different things. So that is just a quick summary of some of the roadmap features, some of the enhancements that we are working on and that we are dedicated to making in the eDiscovery area of Office 365. And hopefully over the course of this session, you've seen that we are absolutely serious about making sure that you have the tools that you need and that you can go to your attorneys, to your legal team, and say, yes, this tool is going to be able to support all of the legal needs of our corporation. But we do also know that eDiscovery is complex. And it's not always so simple to deal with a lot of the various different issues that come up and a lot of the different conversations that come up about eDiscovery. And that is why one of the other things that we've worked on over the past year is developing our Office 365 eDiscovery partner community. The partner community brings with it expertise and knowledge that they have been dealing with this stuff for years and years and years. Most of them have legal resources. They have attorneys on staff who are not just attorneys, but technologists as well. And they are able to work with your corporation, with your internal, both legal and the IT teams, to help you to develop a fully defensible workflow if you don't have the resources and the knowledge to do this yourself. And we have many, many, many different partners that have joined this eDiscovery service provider partner program, which helps to make sure they know Office 365, they know Office 365 eDiscovery, they know the legal workflows, and they are able to help you when you get stuck. So with that, hopefully we were able to hit on all of the different points that we wanted to talk about and help you gain an understanding of where we are today, how Office 365 eDiscovery is used, and where we're headed in the near future. Wanted to just very quickly, they asked us to make sure that we give a pitch for Fast Track, that if you're looking at migrating into Office 365 and you need specific help about things like, I've got all my legal holds in my on-prem solution, how do I move those up into Office 365 so I ensure that the data is still preserved throughout the entire process, things like that. Fast Track is able to assist there. And lastly is the tech community. Please make sure that you're joining, because there are a lot of different conversations that are going on specifically around compliance, eDiscovery, archiving, which are very helpful, and it's a great source of information. So with that, we are going to bring the session to a close. We are available for any questions, and thank you very much.